Good morning, all of you. Let us continue the discussion from the last class. In the last class, what we discussed about natural disasters and man-made disasters, along with we have discussed of droughts also. And now, while looking at the syllabus, the first of all, let us take the first unit. In the first unit, we are having introduction to disasters and what is a disaster and vulnerability, resilience, a definition for different technical terms, and impact of droughts, review of past history of the droughts that we already discussed, classification and characteristics of a drought, and causes and impacts that we have to discuss today. So different types of droughts like social and economical, political, environmental, health and psychological uh, way of droughts, how they are going to affect in these scenarios. So now, as we discussed, let us come to hazard. What is a hazard? You know the what is disaster, right? So what is a hazard? A hazard, it is just nothing but a prediction over any of the upcoming disasters or any upcoming events. So it a hazard can be defined as any source of potential damage, harm, or adverse effects of life, health, properties, or environment. In the in a entire scenario, once a hazard become active and is no longer just a threat, it will be it will become disaster. So when any of the hazard that is being estimated, if that becomes active, then it will be called as a disaster. A hazard like a volcano or earthquake is considered only disaster when it is adversely impacts the community. So it can be, as we discussed, it can be defined in this scenario. Now, while coming to the vulnerability, what is vulnerability? As we know, in this context, the factors that influence vulnerability is the psychological, emotional, social, political, technical, ideological, cultural, etc. So, what is vulnerability? It is just nothing but the entire damage that has taken place after the disaster. Any of the disaster, when we have been exposed to the disaster, then the worst case scenarios that we have faced will be considered as a vulnerability. So the vulnerability is the extent to which an individual, community, subgroup, structure, service, or geographical areas is likely to be damaged by the impact of a particular disaster. So in this, it consists of vulnerability consists of three major elements. One is exposure, second one is resilience, and the third one is resistance. So when you discuss about the exposure, it is just nothing but the degree of a risk of an event experienced in daily life, from the probability of a hazard to actual occurrence of events of all sizes. And while coming to the resilience, it is the ability to recover ranging in degree from a simple achieving stability at any level of functioning to recover the full range of resources and positive momentum that exist prior to the event. So this is how we are going to consider the resilience. And while coming to the resistance simply we can say that it is the ability to withstand the impact and continue to function. So while coming to the risk, so what is the risk? It is generally defined as the expected impact. Whatever the expected impact that we are going to evaluate before the occurrence, that is called the risk. And it is it combines the likelihood or possibility of a disaster happening and a negative impact that result if the disaster occurs. Risk is hazard multiplied by vulnerability, less the capacity of the population to cope. So in this, the probability of a damaging event or circumstances, we are going to evaluate the probability of the risk depending upon the occurrence of the disasters. While coming to the impacts, when we are discussing about the droughts yesterday, we discussed about the droughts and the particular past history where the worst case scenarios has taken place. Okay, now in this impacts of droughts, what are the impacts generally we are having? Social impacts and economical impact, political impact, environmental, health, psychological, etc. So the majorly we can list the impacts according to this. Okay. While coming to the social impact, what is the social impact? The social impact of droughts are most felt as they directly involve people in a community and their families. So, as we discussed in the previous class, what is a drought? A drought is nothing but we can simply define a drought as a scarcity of water, lack of water. When this lack of water is going to take place, there are several reasons for this what we can say. Several reasons are associated with which scarcity of water that we will discuss in the next slides. Now, droughts will result in very poor living conditions, forcing people to immigrate from one place to another place. Why? Because it is a common human psychology that whenever we are not comfortable in living, that means the water is the main criteria to live. That is why when the water is essential, when we are having scarcity of that particular resource, obviously we are going to search for the better resource to live comfortably. So, well, coming to the economic impact. So the droughts can impact economically also. So additional money required, excuse me. Yeah, additional money required. In this, what we are going to consider, wherever the scarcity of water is there, the government should supply the water according to the needs of the people. In that context also, economically, it will become a very important, crucial role of money. Why? Because water should be transported from one place to another place. So for that transportation, the economy will be causing you higher cost, higher impact over the entire society. And now, while coming to the crops also, whenever the shortage of water is there, the yield will be very low considerably. And sometimes it will be completely dried up and the entire crop will be failure. That means crop failure will take place due to the scarcity of water. But some crops which can sustain with low scale of water, generally, if you consider paddy crops, so the depth of the water required for a paddy crops will be from 60 centimeters to 1.15 meters. While coming to the sugarcane also, it is also require approximately 1 meter depth of water for the yield. And while coming to the other crops like vegetation, vegetables, and other crops like you can say cotton. Cotton will require very less water, up to 30 centimeters maximum. So such type of crops we have to select according to the reserves available to overcome the economic impact of the. And also, while coming to the other conditions, additional resources where they have to be drained. Sometimes these droughts can give you an emergency conditions for the entire while it is in a shortage. Entirely, that will become an emergency services. So in that scenario, the cost will be very high to overcome the drought. And while coming to the industries also, in industries, as we know the demand and supply. If you look at the demand and supply criteria, so the demand supply criteria will be less than the demands. So obviously the shortage will be taking place and production will also decreased. While coming to the political impact, how can we say that politically it can impact politically? As we consider hydrologic time as well as what we can say, for suppose you can take an example, any state that can declare a drought emergency seeking help from a central government. So that will be a political scenario. That means due to the scarcity of water, the state governments will become will face the problem, and they, to overcome that particular problem, sometimes the state government should reach the central government for emergency services. So this will be one of the political criteria. State and central government will together try to solve the problem and will supply the additional reserves if required from any of the available sources. So that this will also be a, what we can say, a very crucial political scenarios. Well, coming to the environmental impact. Oh, what is the environmental impact generally drought due to the droughts? If we consider when you are not due to the drought, generally what happens? The nearest water bodies will be dried up. For suppose say example, you can take lakes, creeks, ponds, etc. All these water bodies will be dried up. So the nearest living creatures near that water bodies will face the difficulty, and as well as sometimes it might lead to the loss of lives. So in certain criterias, you can simply say that a ecosystem will be in very much danger while the environment, while the drought is occurring, environmental impact will be in this form. While coming to the quality of soil, definitely due to the moisture content scenario, if you look at the quality of a soil will become infertile also. So sometimes the ability of the soil might lose the ability of its minerals. So that is also one of the criteria. As we know, the soil moisture is important for breakdown of organic matter. And while coming to the other impacts, ecosystems, as we discussed, the ecosystems will be dependent on one on another. As drought affects, entire food chain system and ecosystems will be affected. This is how the environment is going to be affected, and as well as desertification will also one of the environmental change. So that will be very much a crucial point need to consider to maintain the environmental balance. While coming to the health of a community, yeah. Well, when we are dealing with droughts, droughts can reduce air quality and consist the health of a people due to dry soils will be at a very risky condition. That means at a critical conditions. So in such conditions, you can look at the wildfires as we discussed in the natural disasters yesterday class. So wildfires can increase the amount of airborne particles such as smoke and pollens. So due to this, the entire health of the community could be in danger. So respectively, due to the droughts, the quality will be brought down. The quality of living of the people in terms of their health and economy can be brought down considerably. While coming to the psychological impacts. Yeah, psychological impacts of droughts on people in the affected community. If you look at this, first we can consider fear. Okay, so what is a fear? Generally, what we consider fear. So well-being and for suppose this stress that will be developed due to the drought, the psychological condition will create a panic in people. Why? Because as the people are in the requirement of the water, as it is having a shortage, the people will be trying to fulfill that shortage. In that, they will be having a psychological fear to overcome the need. And in that also, the several, what we can say, several people can be in the dilemma to take and the confusion also to consider whether they have to migrate or they have to sustain, they have to resist, and they have to overcome the problem or not. They can overcome or not. They will be they may not be able to take a proper decision to overcome the drought effect. So as we discussed, the effects that have taken place with all these scenario, psychologically human beings are very much fear along the community. So seeking help for oneself and family and helpfulness to others will be becoming very much limited for the people. While coming to the classification, when we are dealing with the classification of disasters in India, majorly we can classify in two categories. One is hydrometeorological disasters and geological disasters. So now in this, what we are having in hydrological disasters, meteorology refers to the transfer of water and energy between land surface and lower atmosphere. That is what we call it as a hydrometeorological disaster. And while coming to the geological, it is also called as a geophysical disaster that originate from the solid earth. They are interchangeably used with the term geophysical hazard. The examples we can give for hydrometeorological are floods, tropical cyclones, droughts, desertification. And while coming to the geological disasters, we can give best examples as earthquakes, mass movement, that means landslides, volcanic activity, etc. Yeah. Floods, tropical cyclones, droughts, and desertification will be the best examples. And while coming to the geological, and when you deal with other types of disasters, so in general, we are having meteorological disasters, hydrological disasters, climatological disasters, biological hazards, biological disasters, etc. So such type of disasters when we deal with, if you consider especially meteorological disasters, it is just nothing but you can take the what we can take an example, extreme temperatures, fog, storm, etc. Nowadays, if you look at the temperatures nearby, they are at a very extreme conditions, right? When you compare with the previous year, the temperatures are being extreme. So such conditions can be called as a meteorological disasters. When you deal with the hydrological disasters, these are caused by occurrence, movement, and the distribution of a surface and subsurface water, which we will call it as a surface water, might be a fresh water or salt water. So that is where we classify hydrological disaster. And while coming to the climatological disasters, in this, these disasters are caused by long-lived meso to macro scale. So in this, the best examples what we can consider is drought, glacial lake outbursts, wildfires. And while coming to the biological hazards, as we discussed biological hazards, it is one of the exposure of the biological hazards are caused due to exposure to living organisms and their toxic substances. Okay, that is where we consider it as a biological hazards. Characteristics of disasters in India. The most common natural disasters, as we know, the characteristics, the listed natural disasters, we can discuss regarding to the following parameters. In terms of these parameters, the characteristics of any disasters can be evaluated. One is predictability, initial lethality, scope, and onset delay. So when you are dealing with any type of disaster, predictability is one of the most best criteria, as we are going to, for example, say in terms of tsunamis, predicting of any tsunami or earthquake or volcano activity, etc. If you consider, so this to predict the tsunami, we are having tsunami buoys in the sea coast. So depending upon the water displacement, we are going to predict whether the movement of a water is heavy or not. So if the water movement is heavy, that means the measurement for suppose if the water movement is more than 15 meters, then obviously it will be causing a mass movement of water. So that will give you warning to the warning centers, such that they will be able to alert the nearest possible communities. So at that criteria, the probability of risk and damage can be reduced. So this is the one of the most basic characteristic to manage the disasters. And while coming to the initially, when you are dealing with prediction, initially what are the steps you have to consider? You have to warn in a proper way through the televisions or through the warning centers, or any of the following, any of the nearest possible way of warning should be initially taken care. And the initially when the disaster is going to hit, so the requirements to protect the human being life or requirements which require to protect, safeguard the people, they have to be prepared. And when you cause the, when you dealing with the impacts of a drought, yesterday we have discussed about the droughts, but we didn't discuss about the impacts. Right? That's why let us come to the impacts. First of all, let us discuss about causes, then we will go for impacts. What are the causes? The drought will occur due to the inadequate rainfall, late arrival of rains, and excessive withdrawal of groundwater. These three are the main criteria. When you consider inadequate rainfall, as we discussed about the rainfall intensity, so the amount of rainwater annually when it is measured, if every year if it is fulfilling that measurement, it will be okay. But in sometimes in 1 year, for suppose say last year the rainfall is good, but this year if the rainfall is lesser than the annual rainfall of the last year, then what happens? Obviously, the shortage of water will be, quantity of water will be taking place, right? So that means it is an inadequate rainfall. So due to the lack of those, whatever the shortage that has been taken place due to the rainfall, that will also one of the main reason for occurring the drought. How we can classify this? Generally by means of percentage of rainfall we can consider. So when annually when you are dealing with the different regions, the different percentages will be there. So according to that, if this percentage is less than 70%, then we can say that inadequate rainfall. While coming to the late arrival of rains, due to the late arrival of rains, what happens? Generally, the cultivation will be affected initially. During that, whatever the delay that has been taken place, so the nearest water bodies can be drained out. So it will leads to the again shortage to the water facility. So the late arrival will also considered as a major criteria for occurring droughts. And while coming to the excessive withdrawal of groundwater. So what happens due to the excessive withdrawal in any context, if you consider, by means of excessive withdrawal of water, the water table will be at a lower level. That means that the water table level will be decreased. So at that point, what happens is, again, the shortage of the water will take place, which will be considered as a drought. How it is going to happen? Why? What are the reasons? Generally, as we are having a rapid industrialization, it is also causing excessive withdrawal of groundwater. That is why, to overcome such type of problems, the industries should be placed such as it should be supplied with the natural surface water. That could be a very good solution for industrialization. Why? Because the amount of groundwater is very less water. So if we drain the water excessively, again to reach the ground table, water table, again to reach at certain level, it will take time. So for that, the full sufficient rainfall should be there. So in such criteria, it is very it is a very critical condition to withdraw groundwater excessively. As we know, yesterday we have discussed about droughts, right? Droughts, but we didn't discuss about the types of droughts, right? So when you deal with the types of droughts, for the first we can classify into 4 types. One is meteorological drought. When the rainfall is less than 75%, of a regular rainfall, as we discussed about the annual rainfall, right? So that in such condition can be considered as a meteorological drought. And this meteorological drought will be very severe when the entire rainfall is lesser than 50% to the normal. Okay. Now, let us come to the hydrological drought. It occurs when the total amount of rainfall is less than the average rainfall. Understood? When the total amount of rainfall is less than the average. So this average will be taken from the previous years. So if the quantity of the rainfall is less than that average, then it is generally associated with the reduction of a statistical average of a water reserves available in the source, such as aquifers, lakes, and reservoirs. So in that condition, if it is lesser than the average rainfall, we will consider that as a hydrological droughts. Well, coming to the agricultural drought, as the name indicates, agricultural droughts. That means the shortage to the agriculture supply. So, when you are dealing with the agricultural supply, this so-called drought can be considered with the timely raining, right? The timing is the most important, as we discussed in the previous slides. Late arrival will also lead to the drought, right? So here it is also the same. When the agricultural drought is being stated in such condition that shortage of water depending upon the time of the crop. So if it doesn't get the timely rainfall, then obviously the agricultural drought will takes place. And this so-called agricultural drought will affect the entire crop system. That is why to select the crops, we need to aware which type of crop will be selected for a certain amount of rainfall. So that will also give you a good result to overcome the agricultural drought. As we know now, if the agricultural drought occurs, there will be shortage of food, then which will lead to a very severe problem in this society. So that is a major reason. While coming to the socio-economic drought, this drought, as we discussed in the agriculture, so due to the reduction in the availability of a food and social security of the people, so that will be considered as a socio-economic drought. Why? Because due to the shortage, the price will be increased. Why? Because demand is more as the supply is very less. This is a common scenario which we can simply say that if the supply is very less, then obviously it will be having higher demand, higher price. So economically, so it will be considered as a socio-economic droughts. Let us come to the effects. So what would be the effects of a drought when we consider the drought effects? Majorly hunger and shortage in the nutrition, scarcity of drinking water, especially in summer. We can look into the current scenario, Hyderabad. So it is also having drought situations. That means scarcity of water, drinking water. So that will be very difficult to overcome. So for that, it is going to take a huge quantity of economic fluctuations for us. So, and this so-called that is one of the effect. While coming to the another effect, crop failure. So the crop failure will take place due to the drought, as well as we know that it leads to the shortage of food, thereby adversely affecting human and livestock populations. That is the one of the reason. And another is desertification. It will leads to the initiation of a desertification. So that will be also environmentally it is going to impact more. That is why when drought indicates the initiation of desertification, we are supposed to overcome that particular effect possible by means of possible available resources. While coming to the raw materials for agro-based industries, critically, agro-based industries, as we know, sugar, the best example, we can take cotton or sugar cane factories and rice mills. These all are agro-based industries. So they will be affected heavily. Why? Because where there is no supply of a proper amount of food supplies, then obviously the manufacturing will be very less. That is why the industries, agro-based industries, will also be affected due to drought. And not only that, in the manufacture process, if the water shortage is continuously happening, that means the scarcity of water. Obviously, the manufacturing of the materials will also be brought slow. That is why this will affect the agro-based and as well as other industries also. And also it accelerates degradation of natural resources. Another major effect of a drought is it speed up the degradation of the natural resources. How? As we know, it is due to the losing of water bodies and losing of the minerals. And if you consider in this way, definitely the degradation of natural resources, water resources, can be accelerated very fast due to the lack of water. Again, the evaporation will also be at a higher rates. While coming to the uh, migration, due to the drought, migration will take place at a large number to the urban areas. By leaving the villages, towns, and people will use to migrate to the nearest urban areas, thereby creating by means of this, the slums will be created. Why? Because due to the large displacement of a large number of people, obviously, to stay there, they have to create their own living. So n number of people are going to stay together. Obviously, the resources will be limited, and the facilities will be very limited, and which will leads to the slums in the urban areas. So this is how the effects of drought we can consider. While we discuss about the drought management, how we are going to manage this drought. To control the droughts, first of all, a very useful, a very important and useful task is to harvest the rainwater, harvesting of a rainwater. So obviously, in this Telangana government also, we used to observe that rain harvesting water program we have been, it has been taken place, and it is having a good results. So like that, if it is possible to harvest the rainwater, definitely we are supposed to overcome the droughts. Why? Because as we discuss about the conservation of water, that means if we conserve at a limited rate due to the reserves, obviously we are going to control the drought effects. How it is going to happen? For suppose say in hilly areas, when rainfall takes place, obviously what happens, the amount of water that will travel from hill to downs, what we can say, hill to down areas, valleys. So at certain regions, what we have to do, we are supposed to create an artificial lakes or ponds, whatever it may be. If it is possible to create in such a manner, a large capacity of reservoirs is possible to store the water. So with that, we are going to utilize that particular water in drought zone, in drought seasons. While coming to the another method of reducing the drought effect is construction of a large capacity reservoirs. So this is also these reservoirs could be in the form of a dams, in the form of lakes, etc. So in especially in drought-prone areas, if it is possible to construct large capacity reservoirs, this will help to overcome the drought. And another way of managing the drought in especially in agricultural field is modern irrigation techniques. It is very useful in avoiding the wastage of water and effective utilization of water to the crop. So with this, we are going to, if we are able to apply modern irrigation techniques like drip irrigation. What is this drip irrigation deals with? Generally, the amount of water what we supply to the crop, it will be supplied by means of drips. So at this point, what happens is the effective supply of water is going to take place to the effective utilization of the crop. So a limited quantity can be supplied in a limited manner. So that is how we are going to avoid the wastage with modern irrigation techniques. While we are dealing with afforestation activities, it improves the potential of water in drought-prone areas. Afforestation, that means when you look at this, if the afforestation activities are increased, then obviously what happens, the erosion will be controlled. So with that, what happens, large quantities of water can be absorbed to the ground and they are going to be stored, and as well as the ground table water will also increase. This is one of the method to follow in drought prone areas. And another most important in agriculture is mixed cropping and dry farming. These two methods are very suitable to minimize the risk of crop failure. Why? Because mixed cropping, in a sense, the mixed cropping deals with different crops in different seasons. And not only that, as we know, the requirement of quantity of water. If the heavy quantity required, that means available of rainwater quantity of water should be heavy, right? So if you minimize that, that means the scale should, if the scale is limited, then obviously what happens, the requirement will be less. So with this, seasonally, when you are going to select the crop, you have to select according to the season. So that is where the risk of crop failure will be reduced. Okay. So in this, whatever the drought management system is there, if we are able to follow these, that means some of the policies, majority of the policies should be taken by the government. So if the government is going to be considered in a proper plan, if it is going to plan in a proper way to overcome the drought. So in the drought prone areas, first of all, we have to list out the drought prone areas. According to that, we have to plan. So depending upon that, what are the amounts of quantities required, and depending upon that, preparation of the reservoirs, that means rainwater harvesting programs. So these will help in managing of these droughts. Okay, guys, and any doubts in this, whatever we discussed, if you have any doubts, please ask me right now. Okay. Now, that is about the droughts. That is one of the disasters. As we deal with the floods, guys, if you have any doubts, you can ask now. whatever we discussed till now, you are free to ask doubts so that we can move to another topic called floods. Okay. In this floods, we will discuss different causes of floods and impacts of floods and remedial methods, flood management. So these three topics we will discuss. Okay. Okay, then shall we deal with the floods? Now, as we know, the drought, it is with the by means of a scarcity of water, right? But in terms of flood, as we discussed in the yesterday class, flood is nothing but an overflow of water. So this overflow of water from water bodies will take place generally, sometimes with heavy rainfall or melting of snow suddenly, and a sudden increase of water from the dams often will leads to floods. And also there is a possibility prolonged heavy rainfall will also leads to the overflowing of other water bodies like lakes, rivers, etc. So this will also cause flood. And while coming to the another cause of flood is reduction in carrying capacity of river channels. Why? Annually, the maintenance of a river should be taken place. If the maintenance is not taken, what is the maintenance? In the maintenance, what happens? Whatever the silt will be there, that should be removed from the reservoir canals. So from there, from river, you have to drain out that so-called silted material. In such a manner, the capacity will not be decreased. So if it is not done, then obviously the capacity of a river will be decreased. But what happens when it is decreased? Due to accumulation of sediments, as we know, the flowing of water capacity as it decreases, in a regular manner, if the regular quantity comes, again it overflows. And occurring of floods will be another reason is deforestation. Over what we can say, deforestation by means of when the deforestation takes place, the effects of environmental impacts will be there. That means when you consider the runoff of water, so due to the rains, this runoff will be having a higher intensity. So if the trees, the plantation and trees are in a proper manner, what happens? It will resist the erosions. So when the runoff is going to reduce, obviously the flow of water can be controlled. So due to this deforestation, what happens? Obviously, the run flow will increase. So which leads to causing of a overflow water at a greater intensities, which will cause you the floods. And while coming to the removal of dense and uniform forest cover over hilly zones leads to occurrence of flood. This is also same scenario, but when you deal with the hilly areas, from the hilly areas, as the flow will be very intensive, if we are not able to, what we can say, maintain a uniform and dense cover, obviously it is going to leads to floods. Well, coming to the effects of floods. Due to floods, the first one is the area will be submerged, right? So the surface will be submerged. So due to that, what happens? It will become a difficult task to live in homes. So the plain surface get eroded and silted with mud and sand, thereby affecting cultivatable land areas will be in danger. As the water is going to be submerged the entire area, obviously the what we can say waterborne diseases will be possibly occur. So extinction of civilization in some coastal areas will also occur. And while coming to the not only this, and we are also due to the floods, the transportation will also break down, the communication will also break down, and what we can say transportation, communication, and waterborne diseases will take place. These are the impacts due to floods. When we are going to consider flood management, so how it is going to flood? As we know the causes, we have to overcome those causes. That is the flood management. Okay. Now, as we know, construction of dams and reservoirs will be one of the best to control the floods. And while coming to the canal maintenance management, and embankments should be maintained in a proper way, which will increase the capacity of the canal. Then obviously there will not be any threat to the floods. And while coming to the encroachment of floodways should be banned. So the floodways encroachment, it is general common factor in regular nowadays. So that particular encroachment should not be entertained, so that it will be having its own capacity. Due to the encroachment, what happens? The capacity of flow will be decreased. And while coming to the flood hazard, flood hazard may be reduced by forecasting or a flood warning, as we discussed, right? In our management system of disasters, if the proper management is there, that means the communication warning centers, obviously it will give you, it will reduce hazard of the floods. So with the forestation, we are going to decrease the flood. So as the forestation increases, the infiltration increases. So obviously the catchment area will be more. So with the catchment area is more, obviously the flood hazard will be minimized. So this is how we are going to deal with the flood management. Today, as we discussed this flood management, and till now, what is the syllabus we covered? The first unit, so the first unit, droughts, impacts, causes, and classification. Yeah, we have covered entire first unit till now. So if you have any doubts in entire this first unit, please, you are free to ask. And after that, from the next class onwards, we will start second unit. So for the first unit, I'm going to give you assignment in the next class. So if we are having any doubts in this, you please ask me right now.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Sir, my name is Mohammed Irshad from Mechanical Department, sir.
Yeah, tell me.
Sir, there are from Mechanical Department, there are, this is the first class for us, sir.
Okay.
They HOD shared a link in our class, so we joined the YouTube channel just a few minutes before, sir. Not more. Not. I think I'm the only one from my department who has joined the class, sir.
Okay.
Could you please? I want to know your contact number or something so that we can instruct something to our students whenever there is a class, sir. So how do we do this? Because
Yeah, definitely. You do one thing. What is your name, Muhammad?
Mohammed Irshad, sir.
Khaja, right?
You can see it on the screen, sir.
Yeah, Khaja.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Khaja. I'm going to give you my number in the chat bar.
Yes, sir.
So you please include in your group also, so that when class is there, I will just intimate you. Okay?
Yes, sir. That's what I want to know.
Okay, beta, I have given the number.
Yes, sir. And thank you very much, sir, for the number, sir.
Yeah, so you need not to worry. I can just briefly I will go through if you want again. Why? Because a
Okay,
number
sir.
of
Not
students, as
like
you said,
we wanted for that because
you are not aware of that. Not a problem.
no.
We will just discuss in brief
Yes,
whenever
sir.
we
Today
find
is
a free
that
time. Okay.
only happened. I mean, only today we got the link, sir. So that's why we that's why I asked you your number, sir. Thank you
Yeah,
very much,
not a
sir.
problem. Not a problem. We have a lot of time. It is
Okay, sir.
being online. We can conduct class whenever you require. Okay.
Okay, sir. Sir,
And
I have one more doubt, sir.
yeah,
Sir, there are like more, in the mechanical department itself, we have like more than 100 students who have opted for disaster mitigation. And
yeah.
in the other sections too, there are like more students. Overall, the strength may go up to 200, sir. So the whole class you are taking up is taken up by you, sir, or there are any some other faculty who are taking DM again?
No, no, no. I am the only one dealing with disaster management.
Okay, sir.
And one more, but
Okay.
due to that, number of students are at
No,
400 around.
yes, sir. Over more, not more. They are
Okay,
more.
at
Yes, sir.
near about 420 students are there, I think, including all branches. So
420.
for that, Google
Yes, sir.
Classroom is not good enough. That
Yes,
is
sir.
why our
Okay.
college is providing YouTube link also to follow the class.
Okay, sir. So, like the students are not enough in the Google Meet. So we
Yeah,
can
they join
directly join
you in
through the YouTube.
our college webinar is there, na?
Yes, sir. I've understood the
Yeah,
webinar which you are presenting in the YouTube MJCET webinar.
yeah,
I have understood it, sir. For the next time, I'll add you in some group of mine, sir. Please instruct
definitely,
in the group, sir. I think
definitely.
today's class is done, right, sir?
Yeah, good, better. Okay, then.
Okay, okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Any more doubts there in this whatever we discussed? You can you are free to ask, my dear students. Yeah, now as we are having a time limit now, so
Sir,
we will meet in the next class. Okay?
sir, can I speak to you on phone, sir?
Yeah, please you can call.
Okay, sir. As soon as this class ends, I'll call you, sir. Thank you very much,
Yeah,
sir.
please. The time is
Okay.
up. Okay, the
Okay.
class
Yes.
is finished.
Okay, sir.
So okay, thank you.